Chapter 1. How It All Began. What you could call my life on the road began when I first met Dean Moriarty, not long after my wife and I separated. Before that, I often dreamed of going west to see the country, always planning but never going. Dean is the perfect guy for the road because he was actually born on the road when his parents were passing through Salt Lake City in 1926 on their way to Los Angeles. First reports of him came to me through Chad King. Chad showed me some letters from Dean written in a New Mexico jail for kids. This is all far back, when Dean was not the way he is today, when he was just a mysterious jail kid. Then news came that Dean was out of jail and was coming to New York for the first time. Also, there was talk that he had just married a girl called Mary Lou. One day in college, Chad and Tim Gray told me Dean was staying in rooms in East Harlem. He had arrived the night before with beautiful little Mary Lou. They got off the Greyhound bus at 50th Street, went around the corner to Hector's Cafe, and bought beautiful big cream cakes. All the time, Dean was telling Mary Lou things like, "Now, darling, here we are in New York, and although I haven't quite told you everything I was thinking when we crossed the Missouri River, it's absolutely necessary now to postpone all those things concerning our personal love and at once begin thinking of work-life plans." That was the way he talked in those early days. I went to their little apartment with the boys, and Dean came to the door in his shorts. Gene had blue eyes and a real Oklahoma accent. He had worked on Ed Wall's farm in Colorado before he married Mary Lou. She was a pretty blonde with long, curly hair. She sat on the couch, her smoky blue eyes staring. But although she was a sweet little girl, she was stupid and could do horrible things. That night we drank beer and talked until dawn, and in the morning, while we sat around smoking in the gray light of a gloomy day, Dean got up nervously and walked around, thinking. Then he decided Mary Lou could get some breakfast. Later, I went away. During the next week, he told Chad King that he absolutely had to learn how to write. Chad said that I was a writer, and he should come to me for advice. Then Dean had a fight with Mary Lou in their Hoboken apartment, just across the Hudson River from New York, and she was so angry that she went to the police and accused Dean of some false, crazy thing, so that Dean had to run away from Hoboken. He came right out to Paterson, New Jersey, where I was living with my aunt, and one night while I was studying, there was a knock on the door, and there was Dean in the dark hall, saying, "Hello, you remember me, Dean Moriarty? I've come to ask you to show me how to write." "And where's Mary Lou?" I asked, and Dean said that she had gone back to Denver. So we went out to have a few beers because we couldn't talk like we wanted to talk in front of my aunt, who took one look at Dean and decided that he was a madman. In the bar, I told Dean, "You didn't come to me only to learn to be a writer. And anyway, what do I really know about it except that you have to work and work at it?" And he said, "Yes, of course. I know exactly what you mean, and in fact, all those problems have come to my attention." And on about things I didn't understand, and he didn't either. But we understood each other on other levels of madness, and I agreed that he could stay at my house till he found a job, and we agreed to go out west at some time. That was the winter of 1947. One night we went to New York, and it was the night that Dean met Carlo Marx. They liked each other immediately, and from that moment on, I did not see Dean as often as before, and I was a little sorry, too. But all the crazy things that were going to happen began then. It would mix up all my friends and all I had left of my family in a big dust cloud over the American night. Carlo told Dean of Old Bull Lee, Elmer Hassel, Jane. Lee in Texas growing marijuana, Hassel in jail, Jane wandering on Times Square full of drugs with her baby girl in her arms until somebody took her to Bellevue Hospital. And Dean told Carlo about people in the West like Tommy Snark, the card player, Big Ed Dunkel, his many girlfriends, sex parties, and other adventures. Then the spring came, the great time of traveling, and everybody was getting ready to go on one trip or another. I was busy working on my novel. And when I was halfway, and after a trip down south with my aunt to visit my brother Rocco, I got ready to travel west for the very first time. Dean left before me. Carlo and I went with him to the 34th Street Greyhound bus station. Dean was wearing a real Western business suit for his big trip back to Denver. It was blue, and he bought it in a store on 3rd Avenue for $11. He also had a small typewriter, and he said he was going to start writing as soon as he got a job and a room in Denver. We had a last meal together. Then Dean got on a bus which said Chicago and went off into the night. I promised myself to go the same way soon. And this was really the way that my whole road experience began, and the things that happened were amazing and must be told. Chapter 2. Halfway Across America. In July 1947, I was ready to go to the West Coast. I had written half my book and had about $50 when my friend Remy Boncoeur wrote me a letter from San Francisco. He wanted me to come out and go with him on a round-the-world trip, working on a ship. He was living with a girl called Leanne, and he said she was a wonderful cook and everything will be great. "The trip west will be good for you," my aunt said. "Just come back in one piece." It was an ordinary bus trip to Chicago, with crying babies and hot sun, and country people getting on at one Pennsylvania town after another. I arrived in Chicago early in the morning, got a room, and went to sleep all day. That night I went to a club and listened to jazz music till dawn. Then the following afternoon, I got a bus to Joliet, Illinois, then started walking west. I had already spent half my money. It was a warm and beautiful day for hitchhiking, and my first ride was with a truck along Route 6, 30 miles into Great Green, Illinois. About 3 in the afternoon, a woman stopped for me in a little car. She wanted somebody to help her drive to Iowa, and I was happy to help. She drove for the first few hours, then I did. I'm not a very good driver, but I drove through the rest of Illinois to Davenport, Iowa, through Rock Island, where, for the first time in my life, I saw the Mississippi River. I got out at Davenport. Here the lady was going to her Iowa hometown by another route. The sun was going down. I had a few cold beers and walked to the edge of town. All the men were driving home from work, and one gave me a ride up the hill and left me at a lonely crossroads. A few cars went by, but no trucks. Soon it was dark, and there were no lights in the Iowa countryside. In a minute, nobody would be able to see me. Then a man going back into Davenport took me back where I started from. I went to sit in the bus station and ate apple pie and ice cream. That's almost all I ate all the way across the country. I decided to get a bus to the edge of the town, but this time near the gas stations. And after 2 minutes, a big truck stopped for me. The driver was a big guy who paid hardly any attention to me, so I could rest quietly without talking. We stopped later, and he slept for a few hours in the driving seat. I slept too. Then, at dawn, we were off again, and an hour later, the smoke of Des Moines appeared over the fields. He had to eat his breakfast now and wanted to rest, so I went right on into Des Moines, about 4 miles. I got a ride with 2 boys from the University of Iowa, and it was strange sitting in their new, comfortable car as we drove smoothly into town. I spent all day sleeping in a room at a small, gloomy old hotel near the railroad line. The bed was big and clean and hard. I woke up as the sun was getting red, and for about 15 seconds I didn't know who I was. I was far away from home, tired from traveling, and in a cheap hotel room I'd never seen. I was halfway across America, at the dividing line between the east of my early life and the west of my future. And maybe that's why I truly forgot who I was on that strange red afternoon. But I had to get moving, so I picked up my bag and went to eat. I ate apple pie and ice cream again. There were beautiful girls everywhere I looked in Des Moines that afternoon, but I had no time now for thoughts like that. But I promised myself a good time in Denver. Carlo Marx was already in Denver. Dean was there. Chad King and Tim Gray were there. And there was mention of Ray Rollins and his beautiful blonde sister, Babe Rollins. And 2 waitresses Dean knew, the Betancourt sisters. And even Roland Major, my old college writing friend, was there. So I rushed past the pretty girls, and the prettiest girls in the world live in Des Moines. Chapter 3. The Greatest Ride of My Life. The greatest ride of my life came outside of the town of Gothenburg. A flat-back truck came by, and 6 or 7 boys were lying out on it. The drivers were 2 young blonde farmers from Minnesota, and they were picking up everybody they saw on that road. They were a smiling, handsome pair of young men. The truck stopped, and I ran up to it. "Is there room?" "Sure, jump on," they said. "There's room for everybody." I jumped on, and the truck drove off. I looked around at the others. There were 2 young farmer boys from North Dakota, 2 city boys from Columbus, Ohio, who were hitchhiking around the United States for the summer, a tall, slim fellow from Montana. Finally, there were Mississippi Gene and his young friend. Mississippi Gene was a little 30-year-old dark guy who rode on trains around the country. His friend was a 16-year-old tall, blonde kid who was quiet and seemed to be running away from something. He had a worried look. Both of them wore old clothes that had turned black from the smoke of the railroads and from sleeping on the ground. "Where are you going?" Mississippi Gene asked me. "Denver," I said. "You got any money?" asked Montana Slim. "No," I said. "Well, maybe enough for some whiskey till I get to Denver. What about you?" "I know where I can get some," he said. "Where?" I said. "Anywhere," he said. "You can always follow a man down a dark street and rob him, can't you?" "Yes, I guess you can," I said. "I'll do it if I really need some money. I'm going to Montana to see my father. I'll have to get off this truck at Cheyenne. These crazy boys are going to Los Angeles." "Straight?" I said. "All the way," he said. "If you want to go to L.A., you gotta ride." I thought about this, but decided that I'd get off at Cheyenne, too, and hitchhike south, 90 miles to Denver. I was glad when we stopped to eat. We all went into the restaurant and had hamburgers and coffee, while the two blonde farmers from Minnesota ate enormous meals. They were brothers, and they took farm machines from Los Angeles to Minnesota. On their trip to the West Coast, when the truck was empty, they picked up everybody on the road. When we got back to the truck, it was almost dark. The drivers smoked cigarettes. "I'm going to buy a bottle of whiskey," I told them. "Okay," they said, "but hurry." Montana Slim and the two city boys came with me. We wandered the streets of North Platte and found a place to buy whiskey. They gave me some money, and I bought a bottle. Then we went back to the truck. It got dark quickly. We all had a drink, except the two Minnesota brothers. "We never drink," they said. But they drove fast, and we were soon looking southwest toward Denver, a few hundred miles away. I was excited. "Whoopee!" I shouted. We passed the bottle of whiskey to each other, and the stars came out, and I felt good. When we came to the town of Ogallala, the two Dakota boys decided to get off and look for work. We watched them disappear into the night. I had to buy more cigarettes. Gene and the blonde boy followed me, and I bought a packet for both of them, and they thanked me. It was nearly midnight, and cold, and the stars were getting brighter. We were in Wyoming now. Mississippi Gene began to sing a song. "I've got a pretty little girl, she's sweet 16. She's the prettiest thing you've ever seen," repeating it with other lines about how far he'd been and how he wished that he could get back to her. I said, "Gene, that's the prettiest song." We got to Cheyenne and saw crowds of people moving along the streets, crowded bars and bright lights. "It's Wild West Week," said Montana Slim. He and I jumped off and said goodbye to the others. We watched the truck move slowly through the crowds and disappear into the night. Chapter 4. The Rocky Mountains. Montana Slim and I began going to the bars. I had about $7. We picked up two pretty girls, a pretty young blonde and a fat girl with black hair. They were moody and not very intelligent, but we wanted to make love to them. We took them to a nightclub which was already closing, and I spent $5 on whiskeys for them and beer for us. I was drunk, but I didn't care. Everything was great. I just wanted the little blonde. I put my arms around her and wanted to tell her. The nightclub closed, and we all wandered out into the dusty streets. I looked up at the sky. The wonderful stars were still there, burning. The girls wanted to go to the bus station, so we went there, but it was to meet a sailor who was waiting for them. He was the fat girl's cousin, and he had friends with him. The blonde wanted to go to her home in Colorado, just south of Cheyenne. "I'll take you in a bus," I said. "No," she said, then went on, "I want to go to New York. I'm tired of this. There's no place to go except Cheyenne, and there's nothing in Cheyenne." "There's nothing in New York," I said. She went to join the sailor and the others. Slim was sleeping on a seat. I sat down and told myself that I was stupid. Why didn't I save my money? I thought. Why did I spend it all on that stupid girl? I laid down on the seat with my bag for a pillow and went to sleep. I woke up at 8 o'clock in the morning with a big headache. Slim had gone. To Montana, I guess. And there, in the blue air, I saw for the first time, far away, the great snowy tops of the Rocky Mountains. And I knew that I had to get to Denver at once. I got a ride in a car with a young fellow from Connecticut. He talked and talked. I was sick from drinking, and once I almost had to put my head out of the window. But by the time he let me off at Longmont, Colorado, I was feeling okay. It was beautiful in Longmont. I slept for 2 hours under a big tree near a gas station, then got a ride with a Denver businessman. We had a long, warm conversation about life, all the way to Denver. In those days, I didn't know Dean as well as I do now. So I phoned Chad King's house. He came and picked me up in his old Ford car that he used for trips into the mountains. Chad is a slim, blond boy, and he smiled when he saw me. Chad had decided not to be Dean's friend anymore, for some strange reason, and he didn't even know where he lived. "Is Carlo Marx in town?" I asked. "Yes," he said, but he wasn't talking to him anymore either. It seemed that Chad King, Tim Gray, Roland Major, and the Rollinses were not seeing or speaking with Dean Moriarty and Carlo Marx, and I was in the middle of this interesting war. My first afternoon in Denver, I slept in Chad King's room while Chad worked at the library, and in the evening his mother cooked us a wonderful dinner. But where was Dean? Chapter 5. Out on the Street. I went to live with Roland Major in a really nice apartment that belonged to Tim Gray's parents. We each had a bedroom, and there was a big living room where Major sat writing his short stories. He was a fat, red-faced hater of everything, who could turn on the warmest and most charming smile in the world when he wanted to. The Rollinses lived near the apartment. This was a lovely family. A young mother with 5 sons and 2 daughters. The wild son was Ray Rollins, and one of Ray's sisters was a beautiful blonde called Babe. She was Tim Gray's girl, and Major's girl was Tim Gray's sister Betty. I was the only guy without a girl. I asked everybody, "Where's Dean?" They smiled, but said they didn't know. Then it happened. The phone rang, and it was Carlo Marx. He gave me the address of his apartment, and I rushed over to meet him. "Where's Dean?" I asked him. "Dean's in Denver," he said, and he told me that Dean was making love to 2 girls at the same time. Mary Lou, his first wife, and Camille, a new girl. Carlo and I went through the streets in the Denver night. The air was so soft, the stars so beautiful, the promise of every street so great that I thought I was in a dream. We came to an old red brick building and went up carpeted stairs. Carlo knocked, then moved back to hide. He didn't want Camille to see him. Dean opened the door. He had no clothes on. I saw a dark-haired girl on the bed, one beautiful, creamy leg half covered. She looked up. "Sal," said Dean, "you've arrived! You finally got on that old road. Now, Camille," he turned toward her, "this is my old friend from New York. It's his first night in Denver, and it's absolutely necessary for me to take him out and find him a girl." "But what time will you be back?" she said. "It is now." He looked at his watch. "Exactly 1:14. I shall be back at exactly 3:14 for our hour together, darling. And then, as you know, I have to go and see the one-legged lawyer in the middle of the night, strange as it seems." This was so that he could see Carlo later, who was still hiding. We rushed off into the night, and Carlo joined us downstairs. "Sal, I have a girl waiting for you this very minute," said Dean. "A waitress, Rita Betancourt, and I've just got to make love to her sister tonight. Tomorrow I know where I can find you a job in the Camargo markets." We got to the house where the waitress sisters lived. The one for me was still working, but the sister that Dean wanted was in. We sat down on her couch. I was due to phone Ray Rollins at this time, and I did. He came over at once, took off his shirt, and began putting his arms around Mary Bettencourt. Bottles rolled on the floor. We drank. 3 o'clock came, and Dean rushed off for his hour with Camille. He was back soon, and the other sister came. We needed a car now, and Ray Rollins phoned a friend who came with his. We all jumped in. "Let's go to my apartment," I shouted. We did, and ran shouting into the building. Roland Major stopped us at the door. "I won't let you behave like this in Tim Gray's apartment," he said. "What?" we all shouted. Everything got confusing. Rollins was rolling on the grass with one of the waitresses. Major was shouting, "You can't come in!" Then we all rushed back to the Denver bars, and I was suddenly alone in the street with no money. My last dollar was gone. I walked 5 miles up to Colfax to my comfortable bed in the apartment. Major had to let me in. The nights in Denver are cool, and I slept like a baby. Chapter 6. The Cost of Living. I worked in the markets for one day, but I didn't go back. I had a bed, and Major bought food, and I did the cooking and washed the dishes. Then I got involved in a trip to the mountains and didn't see Dean and Carlo for 5 days. Babe Rollins borrowed a car. We bought suits and drove to Central City, Ray Rollins driving, Tim Gray sitting in the back, and Babe up front. Central City was an old town that was once called the richest square mile in the world because of the silver that could be found in the hills. Babe Rollins knew of an old house on the edge of the town where we could sleep for the weekend. All we had to do was clean it, which took all afternoon and part of the night, but we had plenty of beer, so everything was okay. We called out to girls who went by in the street, "Come and help us! Everybody's invited to our party tonight." They joined us, and soon the sun went down. It was a wonderful night. Tim, Rollins, and I went to a bar and had a few extra big beers. There was a piano player in the bar, and beyond the back door was a view of the mountain in the moonlight. Later, we went back to our house, and the girls were getting everything ready for the party. Soon, great crowds of girls came in, and then we danced and sang and drank more beer. The place filled up. People brought bottles. The night got more and more exciting. I wish Dean and Carlo were here, I thought. There were beds in the other rooms, and I was sitting on one talking to a girl. Suddenly there was a great crowd of teenage boys rushing in. They were drunk, and they spoiled our party. After 5 minutes, every girl left with one or the other of them. Ray, Tim, and I decided to go back to the bars. Major was gone. Babe and Betty were gone. There was some kind of tourist from Argentina in one place, and he got annoyed when Ray gave him a push to make room at the bar. Ray gave me his glass and knocked him down. There were screams, and Tim and I pulled Ray out. We went to other bars, and much later we rolled back to the house and went to sleep. In the morning, I woke up and turned over. A big cloud of dust rose from the bed. I tried to open the window, but it wouldn't open. Tim Gray was in the bed, too, and we started coughing. Our breakfast was stale beer. Babe came from her hotel, and we got our things together, ready to leave. Suddenly, everything seemed to be going wrong. As we were going out to the car, Babe slipped and fell flat on her face. We helped her up and got in the car. Major and Betty joined us, and it was a sad ride back to Denver. My time there was coming to an end, but I had no money. I sent my aunt an airmail letter asking her for $50. "It will be the last money I ask you for," I wrote. "You will get it back as soon as I get work on that ship." The money arrived 2 days later, and I bought a bus ticket for San Francisco, spending half the $50. In a last phone call, Dean said he and Carlo might join me on the West Coast. I was 2 weeks late meeting Remy Boncoeur in San Francisco. There was a note pinned on the door of his house. Sal Paradis. If nobody is home, climb in through the window. Signed, Remy Boncoeur. Remy was asleep, but he woke up and saw me come in through the window. "Where have you been, Paradis?" he said. "You're 2 weeks late." He slapped me on the back, hit Leanne, his girl, on the chest, laughed and cried and screamed, "Oh, Paradis! The one and only Paradis! Did you see Leanne? He came in through the window." I soon discovered that Leanne had a cruel tongue and said bad things to Remy every day. They spent all week saving pennies and went out on Saturdays to spend $50 in 3 hours. Remy slept with Leanne in the bed across the room, and I slept on a couch by the window. "You must not touch Leanne," Remy told me. "I don't want to find you two kissing and making love when you think I'm not looking." I looked at Leanne. She was a pretty, honey-colored girl, but there was hate in her eyes for both of us. Remy was working as a guard at the barracks, and he got me a similar job. The barracks were the temporary home of building workers who were going overseas. They stayed there, waiting for their ship. Most of them were on their way to Okinawa, Japan, and most of them were running away from something, usually the law. One night, I was the only guard in the barracks for 6 hours. Everybody seemed to be drunk that night. It was because their ship was leaving in the morning. I tried to get them quiet, but I finally gave in and had a drink with them. Soon I was as drunk as anybody else. I earned $55 a week and sent my aunt $40. Some nights, Remy and I were working together, and Remy tried all the doors, hoping to find one unlocked. "Why do you have to steal all the time?" I asked him. "The world owes me a few things, that's all," he said. When we got to the barracks kitchen, we looked around to check that nobody was there. Remy opened a window and climbed through, and I followed him. We looked in the refrigerators to see what we could take home in our pockets. One night I waited a long time as he filled a box with cans and other food. Then we couldn't get it through the window, and Remy had to put it all back. Later that night, he found a key to the kitchen and went back and filled the box again. "Paradis," Remy said, "I have told you several times what the president said. We must cut the cost of living." There was an old rusty ship near the shore, and Remy wanted to row out to it. So one afternoon, Leanne packed a lunch, and we hired a boat and went out. I watched Leanne take all her clothes off and lie down in the sun. Then Remy and I went down to the engine rooms and began looking for anything valuable. But there was nothing there. "I'd love to sleep in this old ship one night when the fog comes in," I said. Remy was amazed. "Sal, don't you realize there may be the ghosts of old sea captains on this thing? But I'll pay you $5 if you're brave enough to do it." "Okay," I said. Remy ran to tell Leanne. I went too, but I tried not to look at her. I wrote long letters to Dean and Carlo, who were now staying with old Bull Lee in Texas, and everything began to go wrong with Remy and Leanne and me. Remy flew down to Hollywood with something I had written, but he couldn't get anybody interested in it, and he flew back. Then he saved all his money, about $100, and took Leanne and me to the races at Golden Gate, near Richmond. He put $20 bets on to win. But before the 7th race, he was broke. We had to hitchhike back to San Francisco. We had no money, and that night it started raining. Leanne was angry with both of us. She was sure that we were hiding money from her. She threatened to leave Remy. "Where will you go?" asked Remy. "To Jimmy," she said. "Jimmy?" said Remy. "A clerk at the races. Did you hear that, Sal?" "Get out," she told Remy. "Pack your things and get out." Remy started packing, and I imagined myself all alone in this rainy house with that angry young woman. Then Remy pushed Leanne, and she began screaming. She put on her raincoat and went out to find a cop. She didn't find one and came back all wet, while I hid in my corner with my head between my knees. What am I doing 3,000 miles from home? I thought. Why did I come here? "And another thing, you dirty man," shouted Leanne. "Tonight was the last night I cook for you, so that you can fill your stomach and get fat and rude in front of my eyes." "I'm very disappointed in both of you," said Remy. "I flew to Hollywood. I got Sal a job. I bought you beautiful dresses, Leanne. Now I ask only one thing. My father is coming to San Francisco next Saturday night. Will you come with me and pretend that you, Leanne, are my girl and that you, Sal, are my friend? I've arranged to borrow $100 for Saturday night. I want my father to have a good time and go away without any reason to worry about me." This surprised me. Remy's father was a doctor. $100? He's got more money than you will ever have, I said to Remy. "You'll be in debt, man." "That's all right," he said quietly. "He's coming with his young wife. We must be very pleasant and polite." Leanne was impressed and looked forward to Saturday. I had finished my job at the barracks, and this was going to be my last Saturday night. Remy and Leanne went to meet his father at the hotel room first. I got drunk in the bar downstairs, then went up to join them all very late. I said something loud in bad French to Dr. Boncoeur, and Remy got angry and embarrassed. We all went to an expensive restaurant where poor Remy spent at least $50 for the 5 of us. And now, the worst thing happened. My old friend Roland Major was sitting in the restaurant bar. He had just arrived from Denver and had a job on a San Francisco newspaper. He was drunk. He came over, slapped me on the back, and threw himself into the seat next to Dr. Boncoeur. Remy had an embarrassed red face. "Please introduce your friend, Sal," he said. "Roland Major of the San Francisco Argus," I said, trying not to laugh. Leanne was very angry with me. Major began chatting in Dr. Boncoeur's ear. "How do you like teaching high school French?" he shouted. "Excuse me, but I don't teach high school French," said Boncoeur. Major knew that he was being rude, but didn't care. I got drunk and began to talk nonsense to the doctor's young wife. I drank a lot and had to go to the men's room every 2 minutes. Everything is going wrong, I thought. Here I am at the end of America. No more land, and nowhere to go except back. But I'll go to Hollywood and back through Texas and see my old friends. In the morning, while Remy and Leanne were asleep, I decided to leave. I quietly climbed out of the window and left with my bag. And I never did spend the night at that old ghost ship. Chapter 7. Love in L.A. 2 rides took me to the south side of Bakersfield, and then my adventure began. I stood for 2 hours on the side of the road as cars rushed by toward Los Angeles. None of them stopped, and at midnight I began walking back into the town. I was going to have to spend $2 or more for a bus ticket to L.A., so I went to the bus station. I was waiting for the L.A. bus when I suddenly saw the prettiest little Mexican girl. She was in one of the buses that came in for a rest stop. Her hair was long and black, and her eyes were great big blue things. I wished that I was on her bus and felt a pain like a knife in my heart, the way I did every time I saw a girl that I loved going in the opposite direction in this too big world. Some time later, I picked up my bag and got on the L.A. bus. And who was sitting there, alone? It was the Mexican girl. I sat opposite her and began planning immediately. I was so lonely, so sad, so tired, so broken, that I found the courage to talk to her. "Miss, would you like to use my raincoat for a pillow?" She looked up with a smile. "No, thank you," she said. I sat back, shaking, and lit a cigarette. I waited till she looked at me with a sad little look of love, and I got up and went over to her. "May I sit with you, miss?" I said. "If you want to," she said. And I did. "Where are you going?" "L.A.," she said, and I loved the way she said it. I love the way everybody says L.A. on the coast, but then it's their one and only golden town. "That's where I'm going too," I said. We sat and told each other our stories. Her story was this. She had a husband and a child. Her husband beat her, so she left him and was going to L.A. to live with her sister for a while. She had left her little son with her family. We talked and talked, and I wanted to put my arms around her. She said she loved to talk with me, and without saying anything about it, we began to hold hands. And in the same way, it was silently and beautifully decided that when I got to my hotel room in L.A., she would be beside me. I ached all over for her, and I rested my head in her beautiful hair. "I love, she said, closing her eyes, and I promised her beautiful love. The bus arrived in Hollywood in the gray, dirty dawn, and she slept in my arms. We got off at Main Street, and here my mind went crazy. I don't know why. I began to imagine that Terry, that was her name, was a girl who tricked men and took them to a hotel where one of her friends waited with a gun. But I never told her this. The first hotel we saw had a vacant room, and soon I was locking the door behind me, and she was sitting on the bed, taking off her red shoes. I kissed her gently, then went out and got some whiskey. Terry was in the bathroom when I got back. I poured whiskey into one big water glass, and we started to drink. "I know a girl called Dory," I told her. "She's 6 foot tall and has red hair. If you come to New York, she will show you where to find work." "Who is this Dory?" she said, suspecting something bad. "Why do you tell me about her?" She began to get drunk in the bathroom. "It doesn't matter. Come on to bed," I said. 6 foot and with red hair?" she screamed. "And I thought you were a nice college boy, but you're a man who employs prostitutes." "No, listen, Terry," I cried. "It's not true. Please listen to me and understand. I'm not like that." And then I got angry. "Why am I begging a stupid little Mexican girl to believe me?" I shouted, and I picked up her red shoes and threw them at the bathroom door. "Get out!" Then I took off my clothes and went to bed. Terry came out of the bathroom with tears in her eyes, saying, "Sorry, I'm sorry." Her simple and strange little mind had decided that the kind of man who employs prostitutes does not throw shoes at doors. Sweetly and silently, she took off her clothes and slid her little body into bed next to mine. I made love to her, and then we fell asleep and slept until late afternoon. We were together for the next 15 days. We decided to hitchhike to New York together, and she was going to be my girl. Terry wanted to start at once with the $20 I had left. I didn't like it. Like a fool, I considered the problem for 2 days, and my 20 was soon 10. But we were very happy in our little hotel room. L.A. is the loneliest city in America. New York gets ice cold in the winter, but it's a friendlier city. South Main Street, L.A., where Terry and I walked sometimes, was full of lights and wildness. Cops stopped and searched people on almost every corner. You could smell beer and marijuana in the air. All the cops in L.A. were handsome and were hoping to get into Hollywood movies. Everyone came to get into Hollywood movies, even me. Terry and I tried to get work, but failed. We still had $10. "I'm going to get my clothes from my sister, and we'll hitchhike to New York," said Terry. "Come on, let's do it." So we hurried to her sister's house, somewhere out beyond Alameda Avenue. I waited in a dark street behind some Mexican kitchens because Terry didn't want her sister to see me. I could hear Terry and her sister arguing in the soft, warm night. I was ready for anything. Terry came out and took me to an apartment house in Central Avenue, and what a wild place that is. We went up dirty stairs and came to the room of Terry's friend, Margarina, who owed Terry a skirt and a pair of shoes. Terry got her clothes, then we went out onto the street, and a black guy whispered, "Marijuana," into my ear. $1. And I said, "Okay, bring it." So we went back to the hotel room and smoked the little brown cigarette. But nothing happened. It wasn't marijuana at all. I wished that I was wiser with my money. Terry and I decided to hitchhike to New York with the rest of our money. She got $5 from her sister that night. Now we had about $13. We got a ride in a red car to Arcadia, California, then walked several miles down the road and stood under a road lamp. Suddenly, cars full of young kids went by. They laughed and shouted at us, and I hated every one of them. Who do they think they are, shouting at somebody on the road? I thought. Just because their parents can afford roast beef on Sundays. And we didn't get a ride. That night, in a little $4 hotel room, we held each other tight and made a plan. Next morning, we were going to get a bus to Bakersfield and get a job picking grapes. We could live in a tent. After a few weeks of that, we could go to New York the easy way, by bus. But there were no jobs in Bakersfield. We ate a Chinese dinner, then went across the railroad lines to the Mexican part of town, where Terry talked with the Mexicans, asking for jobs. It was night now, and the little Mexican street was bright with the lights of movie theaters, cafes, and bars. Terry talked to everybody. Then we bought a bottle of whiskey and went and sat near the railroad buildings. We sat and drank till midnight, then got up and walked to the highway. Terry had a new idea. "We can hitchhike to my hometown, Sabinal, and live in my brother's garage," she said. We got a ride in a truck and arrived in Sabinal just before dawn. I took her to an old hotel by the railroad, and we went to bed comfortably. In the bright, sunny morning, Terry got up early and went to find her brother. I slept till noon. Terry arrived with her brother, his friend, and her child. Her brother's name was Ricky. He was a wild Mexican guy who liked whiskey, and he had a car. His friend Ponzo was a big, fat Mexican who spoke English without much accent. I could see that he liked Terry. Her little boy was Johnny, 7 years old, with dark eyes, and a sweet kid. "Today we drink, tomorrow we work," Ricky said, and off we went to a bar. It was a noisy place, and soon we were drinking and shouting with the music, while little Johnny played with other kids. The sun began to get red, and we came out and got into the car again. Off we went to a highway bar, and later I spent $1 on a meal for Terry and me in a Mexican restaurant. Now I had $4. Ricky was drunk, and poor little Johnny was asleep on my arm as we drove back towards Sabinal. That night, Terry and Johnny and I slept in a place with rooms for rent and tents out at the back. We had a room. Ricky drove on to sleep at his father's house, and Ponzo went to find his truck to sleep in. In the morning, I got up and went for a short walk. We were 5 miles outside of Sabinal, in cotton and grape-picking country. I asked the woman who owned the place, "Are there any of the tents vacant?" And she said there was one. It was the cheapest, $1 a day. I gave her $1 and we moved into it. Later, I went to look for some cotton-picking work and got a job with one of the farmers. He gave me a big sack and told me to start at dawn the next day. On the way back, some grapes fell off the back of a truck, and I picked them up and took them back for Terry and Johnny. "Johnny and I will help you pick cotton," Terry told me. "I'll show you how to do it. It's hard work." She was right. Picking cotton was hard work, and after an hour the next day my fingers began to bleed and my back began to ache. But it was beautiful country. Across the fields were the tents, and beyond them the brown cotton fields, and beyond them the snow-topped Sierra Mountains in the blue morning air. Johnny and Terry arrived at noon to help me, and little Johnny was faster than I was, and of course Terry was twice as fast. We worked together all afternoon, and when the sun got red, we went back with my sack. The farmer weighed it and gave me $1.50. Then I borrowed a bicycle from one of the other men and rode down to a highway store and bought bread, butter, coffee, and cake. On the way back, traffic going to L.A. and San Francisco almost knocked me off my bicycle, and I swore and swore. I looked up into the dark sky and prayed to God for a better life and a better chance to do something for the little people I loved. But nobody was listening. Every day I earned less than $2. It was just enough to buy food in the evening. Time went by, and I forgot about Dean and Carlo and the road. Johnny and I played all the time, and Terry mended clothes. It was October now, and the nights were colder. Finally, we did not have enough money to pay the rent for the tent. "We have to leave here," I said. "Go back to your family, Terry. You can't live in tents with a baby like Johnny. The poor little thing is cold. And I have to get to New York." "I want to go with you, Sal," she said. "But how?" "I don't know," she said. "But I'll miss you. I love you." "But I have to leave," I said. "Yes, yes. We lay down one more time, then you leave," she said. So we made love one more time. Chapter 8. Dean's Story. Times Square in New York. I had traveled 8,000 miles around America, and I was back in Times Square. Paterson, where my aunt lives, is a few miles from Times Square. I had no money to go home in the bus, but I finally begged the price of a ticket from a Greek guy. When I got home, I ate nearly everything in the refrigerator. My aunt looked at me. "Poor little Salvatore," she said in Italian. "You're thin. Where have you been all this time?" I couldn't sleep that night. I just smoked in bed. The half-finished book I had been writing was on the desk. It was October. Everybody goes home in October. It was more than a year before I saw Dean again. I stayed home all that time, finished my book, and began going to college. At Christmas 1948, my aunt and I went down to visit my brother in Virginia. I had been writing to Dean, and he told me he was coming east again. I told him I was going to be in Testament, Virginia, between Christmas and New Year. One day, when all our relations were sitting in the house and talking, a 1949 Hudson car stopped outside. There was mud and dust on it. A tired young fella got out, came to the door, and rang the bell. He was wearing a torn shirt, and he needed a shave. I suddenly realized it was Dean. He had come all the way from San Francisco, and there were 2 more people sleeping in the car. "Dean!" I cried, smiling. "It's you! And who is in the car?" "Hello, hello, man," he said. "It's Mary Lou and Ed Dunkel. We need a place to wash, and we're tired." "But how did you get here so fast?" I said. "Man, that Hudson goes fast," he said. "Where did you get it?" I asked. "I bought it. I've worked on the railroads for $400 a month." For the next hour, my Southern relations did not know what was happening. They did not know who Dean, Mary Lou, or Ed Dunkel were, and they just sat and stared. There were now 11 people in that little house. Also, my brother Rocco had decided to move, and half his furniture had gone. He and his wife and baby were moving closer to the town of Testament. They had bought new furniture, and some of their old furniture was going to my aunt's house in Paterson, although we had not yet decided how it was going to get there. When Dean heard this, he immediately offered to take it in the Hudson. He and I could carry the furniture to Paterson in 2 fast trips and bring my aunt back at the end of the second trip. This was going to save a lot of money, so it was agreed. Then Rocco's wife made a meal, and we all sat down to eat. I learned that Dean had lived happily with Camille in San Francisco since that fall in 1947. He had got a job on the railroad and earned a lot of money. He was also the father of a pretty little girl, Amy Moriarty. Then he suddenly went crazy while walking down the street one day. He saw a 1949 Hudson for sale and rushed to the bank for all his money. He bought the car immediately. Ed Dunkel was with him. Now they were broke. Dean calmed Camille's fears. "I'm going to New York and bring Sal back," he told her. "I'll be back in a month." She wasn't very pleased. "But why?" she asked. "Why are you doing this to me?" He told her why, but of course it did not make sense. Big, tall Ed Dunkel also worked on the railroad, and he met a girl called Galatea. He and Dean decided to bring the girl east and get her to pay for the meals and gas, but she wouldn't do this unless Ed married her, so he did. And a few days before Christmas, they rolled out of San Francisco at 70 miles an hour. All the way, Galatea complained that she was tired and wanted to sleep in a hotel. 2 nights she forced them to stop, and they spent money on hotel rooms. By the time they got to Tucson, she was broke, and Dean and Ed managed to lose her in the hotel and traveled on alone. Dean was driving through Las Cruces, New Mexico, when he suddenly wanted to see his first wife, Mary Lou, again. She was in Denver. He turned north and got to Denver in the evening. He found Mary Lou in a hotel. They made love for 10 wild hours and decided that they were going to be together again. She understood Dean. She knew that he was mad. Dean, Mary Lou, and Ed Dunkel then left Denver and drove fast to my brother's house. They were hungry, and now they were eating everything they could see on my brother's table. Dean, with a sandwich in his hand, was dancing while he listened to jazz music on the radio. My Southern relations watched, amazed, but Dean paid no attention to them. He was different, I decided. He was crazier now. Later, Dean, Mary Lou, Dunkel, and I went for a short ride in the Hudson. Dean was driving. "What happened to Carlo?" he asked. "We must go and see Carlo tomorrow, darlings. Now, Mary Lou, we need some bread and meat to make a lunch for New York. How much money do you have, Sal? We'll put everything in the back seat, Mrs. P's furniture, and all of us will sit up front, nice and close, and tell stories as we ride to New York." I was enjoying a quiet Christmas in the country, I thought, when we got back to the house and I saw the Christmas tree. Now Dean Moriarty is here, and I'm off on the road again. Chapter 9. On the Road Again. We packed my brother's furniture in the back of the car and promised to be back in 30 hours. 30 hours for 1,000 miles north and south. In the large and comfortable Hudson, there was plenty of room for all of us to sit up front. It was a new car, but the heater wasn't working, so a blanket covered our legs. We rushed through Richmond, Washington, Baltimore, and up to Philadelphia on a country road, and talked and talked. I told Dean and Mary Lou about a beautiful Italian girl with honey-colored hair called Lucille. "I met her at college," I said, "and I want to marry her." Mary Lou wanted to meet her. In Philadelphia, we went to a cafe and ate hamburgers. It was 3 a.m., and the cafe owner heard us talking about money. He offered to give us the hamburgers free, plus more coffee, if we washed all the dirty dishes in the kitchen. "Okay," we said. Ed and I did the dishes, while Dean and Mary Lou kissed and whispered together in a corner of the kitchen. We finished the dishes in 15 minutes. When dawn came, we were driving through New Jersey, with the city of New York in the snowy distance. Then we went through the Lincoln Tunnel and over to Times Square, because Mary Lou wanted to see it. After that, we went to my house in Paterson and slept. I was the first to wake up late in the afternoon. There was a phone call from old Bull Lee, who was in New Orleans. He was complaining. "A girl called Galatea just arrived at my house," he said. "She's looking for a guy called Ed Dunkel." "Tell her that Dunkel is with Dean and me," I said. "Tell her we'll probably pick her up in New Orleans on our way to the West Coast." Then Galatea Dunkel came to the phone herself. "How is Ed?" she wanted to know. "Is he okay? Is he happy?" I told her that he was. "How did you get from Tucson to New Orleans?" I asked. "I rode home for some money and then got on a bus," she said. She was determined to catch up with Ed because she loved him. After the phone call, I told Big Ed. He sat in the chair and looked worried. Next, there was a call from Camille in San Francisco and Dean talked to her. Then we phoned Carlo Marx at his home in Long Island and told him to come over. He arrived 2 hours later and sat quietly watching Dean and me get ready for our trip alone to Virginia to pick up the rest of the furniture and bring my aunt back. Dean had a shower while I cooked some rice. Mary Lou mended his socks, and then we were ready to go. Dean, Carlo, and I drove into New York. We promised to see Carlo in 30 hours, in time to greet the new year. Dean talked all night. He was very excited about everything he saw, every detail of every moment that passed. "Everything is fine, Sal," he said. "God exists. I used to be a jail kid, stealing cars. But all my jail problems are over now. I shall never be in jail again." We passed a kid who was throwing stones at cars in the road. "Look," said Dean. "One day he'll throw a stone at a car, and the car will crash, and the man will die. All because of that little kid. Yes, God exists, and we know America. We're at home. I know the people. I know what they do." There was nothing clear about the things he said, but what he meant to say was somehow pure and clear. Even my aunt listened, half curiously, as we drove back to New York that night with the furniture in the back of the car. At 4 a.m. in Washington, Dean stopped and phoned Camille in San Francisco. Soon after this, a police car overtook us and stopped us because we were going too fast, although we were only doing 30 miles an hour. Dean and I went to the police station and tried to explain that we didn't have any money to pay the $15 fine. But while we were arguing with the cops, one of them went out to look in the back of the car where my aunt was sleeping. She woke up and saw him. "Don't worry," she said. "I don't have a gun. Search the car if you want to. I'm going home with my nephew, and we didn't steal this furniture." My aunt paid the fine, and Dean promised to pay her when he had the money. And he did, a year and a half later. We arrived at the house in Paterson at 8 a.m. Chapter 10. Driving South. The New Year weekend went on for 3 days and 3 nights. Great gangs got into the Hudson, and we slid through the snowy New York streets from party to party. Lucille saw me with Dean and Mary Lou, and she was not happy. "I don't like you when you're with them," she said. Then Mary Lou began making love to me. She said Dean was going to stay with Camille, and she wanted me to go with her. "Come back to San Francisco with us," she said. "We'll live together. I'll be a good girl for you." But I knew Dean loved Mary Lou, and I also knew Mary Lou was doing this to make Lucille jealous. And when Lucille saw Mary Lou pushing me into corners and kissing me, she accepted Dean's invitation to go out in the car. But they just talked and drank some whiskey. Everything was mixed up. Lucille will never understand me, I thought, because I like too many things and get all confused running from one falling star to another. I have nothing to offer anyone except my own confused thoughts. The parties were enormous. There were at least 100 people at one apartment. Something was happening in every corner, on every bed, and on every couch. Not sex, just a New Year's party with wild screaming and wild radio music. Outside there was a wonderful snowstorm. Ed Dunkel met Lucille's sister and disappeared with her. And at 5 o'clock in the morning we were all climbing through the window of another apartment and another party. At dawn we were back in the first apartment, and I slept on a couch with a girl called Mona in my arms. In the middle of the long, mad weekend, Dean and I went to see the jazz piano player, George Shearing, at Birdland. These were his great 1949 days. When he finished playing the sweetest jazz I ever heard, Dean pointed at the empty piano seat and said, "God's empty chair." We were smoking marijuana, and it made me think that everything was about to arrive, the moment when you know everything, and everything is decided forever. I left everybody and went home to rest. My aunt said that I was wasting my time going around with Dean and his gang, but I knew that I wanted to go on one more wonderful trip to the West Coast and get back in time for the spring term at college. We got ready to cross the country again. I gave Dean $18 to send to his wife. She was waiting for him to come home, and she was broke. What was Mary Lou thinking? I don't know. Ed Dunkel, as usual, just followed. We phoned old Bull Lee in New Orleans. "What do you boys expect me to do with this Galatea Dunkel?" he complained. "She's been here 2 weeks now, hiding in her room and refusing to talk." Ed spoke to him and promised to come. I said goodbye to my aunt and promised to be back in 2 weeks. He was excited. "Hoo-wee!" shouted Dean. "Here we go!" From the dirty snows of New York to the green and river smells of New Orleans at the bottom of America, then west. Ed was in the back seat. Mary Lou, Dean, and I sat in the front, with Dean driving. Fast. "Now listen, Mary Lou, honey," he said. "In San Francisco, we must go on living together. I know just the place for you, and I'll be home just a little less than every 2 days for 12 hours. And you know what we can do in 12 hours, darling. I'll go on living at Camille's, and she won't know about us. We can do it. We did it before." It was all right with Mary Lou, but I had understood that she would come to me in San Francisco. Now I began to see that they were going to stay together, and I was going to be alone in California. But why think about that when all the golden land's in front of you, and all kinds of nice surprises wait for you? We arrived in Washington at dawn. Then Dean went to sleep in the back seat, and Dunkel drove. We told him not to go too fast, but as soon as we were asleep, he pushed the speed up to 80, and a cop came after us and stopped us. He told us to follow him to the police station. The cop at the police station didn't like Dean. "The fine is $25, he said. "But we only have $40 to go all the way to the coast," said Dean. "The fine is still $25, said the cop. "And if you get another fine in Virginia, you'll lose your car." We paid the $25 and drove away silently. But when we got through Richmond, we began to forget about it, and everything was okay again. I drove through South Carolina and beyond Macon, Georgia, while Dean, Mary Lou, and Ed slept. All alone in the night, I had my own thoughts. What am I doing? Where am I going? I got very tired after Macon, and I woke Dean. We got out of the car for air, and suddenly we could smell grass and feel warm air on our faces. "We're in the South," said Dean, laughing. "We left the winter behind." 10 miles down the road, Dean drove into a gas station with the engine off. The man at the desk was asleep, and Dean jumped out quietly and put gas in the car before we drove off again. I slept and woke up to hear music and Dean and Mary Lou talking. We stopped at another gas station later, where Dunkel stole 3 packets of cigarettes. Then, suddenly, we could see New Orleans in the night in front of us. The air in New Orleans was sweet, and you could smell the river. Dean was pointing at the women. "Oh, I love women," he shouted. "I think women are wonderful."
End of CD 1. CD 2.
We took the car onto the Algiers ferry to cross the Mississippi River and jumped out to look at the brown water rolling by. We were leaving New Orleans behind on one side, and we could see sleepy Algiers on the other. We came off the ferry and went to old Bull Lee's house outside town. It was on a road that went across a muddy field. The house was old, and the grass outside was knee-high. We stopped the car, and I got out and went to the door. Jane Lee was standing there. "Jane," I said. "It's me. It's us." She knew that. "Yes," she said. "Bull isn't here." "Is Galatea Dunkel here?" Jane used to live with my wife and me in New York. Her face was thin and red, and she looked tired. Dean and the gang came out of the car, and then Galatea came from the back of the house to meet Ed. She was a serious girl, and her face was pale. Ed pushed a hand through his hair and said hello. She looked at him. "Why did you do this to me?" she said. She looked nastily at Dean, but he paid no attention to her. He asked Jane, "Is there anything to eat?" It began to get confused then. Poor Bull came home and found his house full of crazy people, but he greeted me with a nice smile. He and his wife had 2 wonderful children, Dodie, 8 years old, and little Ray, 1-year-old. Ray ran around the yard without his clothes. "Sal, you finally got here," said Bull. "Let's go into the house and have a drink." Bull was a teacher, a gray, quiet fellow that you didn't notice on the street unless you looked closer and saw his mad, bony head and strangely young face. He once studied medicine in Vienna. Now he was studying things in the streets of life and the night. He sat in his chair and Jane brought drinks. "Sal, what kind of a person is this Ed Dunkel?" Bull asked. At that moment, Ed was making Galatea forgive him in the bedroom. It didn't take him long. We didn't know what to tell Bull about Ed. Jane was never more than 10 feet away from Bull, and she never missed a word that he said. Dean and I wanted Bull to take us to New Orleans. "It's a very dull town," he said, but he agreed to take us. We left Jane with the children, and Dean drove us into New Orleans. He drove very fast, as usual, and Bull said, "You'll never get to California alive with this madman, Sal." There was fog when we got to the ferry, and the lights of New Orleans were orange bright across the brown water of the Mississippi. And a strange thing happened on the ferry that night. A girl threw herself over the side and drowned, either just before or just after our trip. We read about it in the newspaper the next day. Old Bull took us to all the dull bars in the French Quarter, and we went back home at midnight. That night, Mary Lou took all the drugs that Bull would give her, and Ed went to lie with Galatea in the big bed that old Bull and Jane never used. Dean was smoking marijuana. I went for a walk by the Mississippi River. Next day, I got up early and found old Bull and Dean in the backyard. It was a lovely, warm morning. Great beautiful clouds floated across the sky, and the softest wind blew in from the river. We spent a mad day in downtown New Orleans, walking around with the Dunkels. Dean was crazy that day. He and I and Ed Dunkel ran across the railroad line and jumped on a moving train, while Mary Lou and Galatea waited in the car. We rode for half a mile, and Dean and Ed showed me the proper way to get off a moving train. We got back to the girls an hour late, and of course they were angry. Ed and Galatea decided to get a room in New Orleans and stay there and work. This was okay with Bull, who was tired of the whole gang now. We were waiting for some money to come from my aunt. When it came, the three of us, Dean, Mary Lou, and I, said goodbye. We were off to California.